Today we're tackling stress head-on, Joe, and you and I talk a lot about mindfulness and meditation, and what that means to me is living in the present moment, focusing on the positives in life and trying to be truly grateful for the many things that I have got to be grateful for.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the moment where I understood that I can choose where I put my attention. So you can get caught up in all these things that are going on. You think you're powerless, but actually I can choose to put my attention on the sunshine or on my dear friend next to me or the smells in the air or whatever it might be. It's a radical thing when you realise you have that power.
And of course, setbacks and trying times hit us all from time to time and can make us all feel anxious. It's when those feelings don't go away and build up so much, they start to affect the quality of your life, that's when it becomes a real problem.
According to Beyond Blue, 1 in 4 Aussies will experience anxiety at some stage in their life. What's important is recognising the warning signs and knowing what to do about it.
So what is anxiety? It's a normal response to keep us safe. That burst of energy that kicks in when you need to get out of the way of danger is anxiety. And when your heart starts beating faster and the butterflies let loose in your gut before speaking to a room full of people, well, that's anxiety too. It can motivate you at times when you really need to get through something challenging, or it can cause you to disengage completely. And that's when anxiety begins to take over. There's lots of signs, from sweating and tummy upsets, to excessive fear, rapid breathing, and not sleeping. But mainly, if anxiety is getting in the way and affecting your quality of life, then it's time to get help and tame the beast.
So what's the difference between stress and anxiety, and how do we keep both at bay, Joe? Well, here to give us some insight, welcome author and mindfulness expert, Professor Craig Hassad. Welcome, Craig. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Luke. It's great to be with you.
Craig, you've written an incredible 14 books on mindfulness as a way of coping with stress. Can you start by telling us the physical effects of stress and anxiety?
Well, look, it really depends on if it's being activated when we need it and when we don't need it. Like if you're trying to get away from a tiger or a shark, that stress response could be, if we're lucky, the difference between life and death. So it's actually a really useful response that might save our life in that situation. But unfortunately, we activate it when we don't need it. You know, angry at the traffic lights and worrying about deadlines. And so we're activating stress all the time when all the chemicals are pumping around, nowhere to go. And that produces a wear and tear on our system that is called allostatic load. But it's like getting a car and driving the car really hard all the time. We run out of fuel, the parts wear out faster and so on. We've just got lots of fancy names for it, but it's basically wears out the system much quicker and it accelerates ageing as well.
Before the break, we met Jerry, who suffered a heart attack in part due to stress. Can it cut short our life in other ways? Yes,
it can. So, and when we talk about stress and that response, it's also when we're angry and so on, that activates the same response. So if we've got high levels of anger or a lot of stress in our life, and I'm not talking about life challenges, because that can bring out the best in us, but I'm talking about the things that really make us worry and fret over, you know, day after day. That puts a wear and tear and it accelerates the progression of things like heart disease, and it puts impairs our immunity and resistance to illness. So there's lots of ways in which our health really takes a turn for the worse. The good news is, if you want the good news, that they're reversible effects, but that's the whole point.
Now, Professor, leave COVID aside, which has clearly caused a lot of stress. Are we in general having higher levels of stress these days?
Looking at figures over decades, the levels of stress that people report in their day-to-day life have gone up significantly, and we're getting more stressed over things that perhaps we wouldn't have gotten stressed about 1-2 generations ago. And mental health also has sort of been on the decline. And so there's a lot of ways in which modern life, with all its wonderful opportunities and everything else that it offers, is actually kind of creating this sort of level of stress, and disconnection with kind of sort of adds to it as well.
You know, you hear people say, I thrive under pressure. So can there be a certain amount of stress that is good for us?
Yeah, if somebody says I'm thriving under pressure, they probably haven't got that bad stress. It's when we feel like I'm crumbling under pressure. And we've got to distinguish between the pressure that's coming from there and the pressure we're generating for ourselves. And it can be a bit of both. But if somebody's thriving, being in a challenging situation can be very motivating. it can bring out the best in us. It could be like a football team, for example, that rises to a challenge. So that can actually be a very useful thing and quite motivating. It's the kind of when we're in a situation and we want to be out of it and we hate it and we're reacting to it and wishing we're somewhere else, which is kind of the opposite of being mindful, then that can really cause quite a lot of problems.
So then what is the best way for dealing with ongoing stress and anxiety?
Look, I'll put it in a practical context, but for every one tiger we see, we've got probably another 100 up here. And so we've got to distinguish between the real ones and the imaginary ones. And if we come back to the present moment, you kind of realise, wait a sec, there are birds singing and there's sunlight coming through the trees and the body, so you just come back to the present moment and experience that for what it is. And if we do that, we'll probably find the stress response switches itself off. Lying in bed in the middle of the night, I've got 1,000 problems. But all that's actually happening is the body's lying on a comfortable mattress under a warm doona with a head on a soft pillow. That's all that's actually happening. But in our mind, we're somewhere else. And so we have to, in a sense, bring our attention back to where we are. If we do that consistently, it has a very beneficial effect for our health.
I feel calm being around Craig.
I know.
I think
I'm having a little moment.
More of what you're doing works. Joe and I have been really passionate about this space for many, many years, and we really appreciate you coming in and sharing your great wisdom today. Thanks for your time.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.